Hey everyone, welcome to Midas Letter RAW. First question you have is, where's James? He's in LA. He's having some fun doing some business. We've been shooting out there. I might talk a bit more about that later. But right now we're joined with Stephen Misener, who's a veteran portfolio manager on Bay Street, former. But it's good to have him in here and make sense of what's going on in the market. So how's it going, Stephen?
It's good, Fraser. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm a little jet lagged. When you come from the West Coast back to the East Coast, it's a little bit tough. But
From the nice weather in LA versus here, no one's going to give you any sympathy.
I know. I know that. So interesting today. First looked at the marijuana indices and noticed that things were falling off a bit in the morning. But since then, it's only gotten worse, and it's kind of to the point now where it looks sort of like a big event.
Well, I think you need to paint the broader markets as well. I mean, the Dow was doing better in the morning, and then it kind of pulled back, and I think it's last time I looked, it was up about 100. But we've had such choppy times in the last several weeks on the broader markets. Markets more focused on suddenly preservation of capital than growth. And so when you have a sector like the cannabis stocks in Canada that have been such hot performers for a long time, they tend to be more vulnerable, and those sectors tend to be more vulnerable when there are temporary liquidity crunches or a general malaise or nervousness in the markets.
Yeah, well, we had in Canada a rise of raising interest rates and the threat of more coming, and then they're talking about that in the States a little bit too. So that's kind of enough to scare some people out of holding positions in this space, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been a long run in the markets in general. I don't think that the play, and I don't think the investment opportunities are over in the cannabis space. I mean, it's such a new sector. It has such great potential, and it's a long-term play. Whenever you have product historically that you can produce very cheaply, and you can sell it with good margins built in, and you have really a powerful demand for it, and you can look historically at consumer products like alcohol, beer, tobacco, even coffee. I mean, I'm sure those cups of coffee at the big coffee retailers, I'm sure they cost them 5 cents to make a cup of coffee, and they get to sell it for $2 or $3. That is tremendous margin business. And the cannabis space, let's not forget, is the same kind of tremendous margin business. Yes, there's some growing pains, and we're shifting from those companies where we talked in previous shows about the concept, the future, the possibilities, and a lot of that is built into these companies. Now we need to start seeing the revenues, and the revenues will track. A lot of these companies are still trading on the future rather than current revenue growth.
Yeah, well, just before we started the show, we were talking about Benjamin A. Smith's article, the senior writer for Midas Letter. He wrote an article about GMP Securities research note induces round of cannabis stock selling. But really he's saying that, well, they mentioned retail sales might not be what they thought they were going to be, as well as the fact that the stocks seem to follow the S&P 500. But in terms of the retail stuff, like we were just saying, to me, it's like if you're providing in Ontario a allotment of product to the online retail store, and it sells out, and then you're, filling it back up again, or however the process works, there's not much more you can do. That's sort of a bottleneck that's built into this initial retail phase.
I think Ontario in particular, I mean, obviously the most populous part of Canada, but the fact that it's constrained under growth pains, growing pains to online only while they sort out the retail distribution. But remember under the Ford government, provincially, they're going to expand the distribution beyond the realm of the government or the LCBO's outlet or subsidiary. So I think we can also look that they said maybe by May 1st that there will be retail, bricks and mortar storefront sales. So I think we start counting those months. That's 6 months. It's a little too far away, but within a short period of time. And I think, as in with the other provinces, we will see then where the true. So I don't think it's fair to gauge the sales possibilities or projections in Ontario by restricting to online at this moment.
And 12 days of
well, I mean, 12 days, and then there was the threat of a postal strike and complications related to that. So, but I think as we get closer to the May 1st next year.
I think it might be April 1st.
Or April 1st.
That's
but I'm just giving some slack adjustments to that. But I mean, 6 months, 12 months from now, then we'll see, once all these growing pains have taken, have been ironed out and bottlenecks, that then we'll start to see where true growth in the marketplace hits. Stock markets are forward, stocks in general or equities are forward discounting mechanisms, so we need to kind of always assume that the price of a share today is based on how people are projecting or anticipating the future. And right now, with bad overall stock markets presently, people are focusing on maybe what might not go right or what might be a shortcoming in terms of projections, whereas only a month ago they were kind of excited about the potentials. And this is part of the emotional component in the equity markets that's hard to forecast but can change quickly. And we've seen times in the past, over the last 5 years of following the cannabis stocks in Canada as they began from their infancy, that there have been periods where the cannabis stocks have been falling either aggressively like now or just drifting from a lack of buying and lack of news and the general malaise. So we'll look forward to, again, some positive catalysts forthcoming, because we know they're out there, they just aren't there today.
For sure. I just want to take a quick peek at the indexes because, so let's see here. Yeah, I mean, it's a red day. It's, just for reference, the small cap index is down just under 8%. The Midas Letter Canadian Venture Cannabis Index, 7.5%. And then we have the big board, which is the Canadian Cannabis Index, is down 13.76%. So those
are some big numbers on the downside.
Yeah.
And we know there are buyers in the wings, but remember that when buyers see these kind of markets, both the broader, weaker markets in equities in general and specific to this sector, there's a sentiment that, well, I don't need to buy today, perhaps, because it might be cheaper tomorrow. But we've seen these things turn on a dime. We've seen them turn dramatically on the upside, and then suddenly there's I wouldn't say panic buying, but there's certainly a complete 180 turn in sentiment that, okay, well, I missed the bottom, now I better get back long. Obviously, that's not been happening the last couple of weeks, but these companies, for the most part, are cashed up. There are a lot of plays to come here. I think more mergers. We're seeing some of what's called a roll-up play in the Canadian cannabis market, where some of the larger players have been doing strategic partnerships, and buying or merging or friendly deals with other companies. Sometimes in a marketplace like this, you'll see more of that going on, where you get some consolidation, and that also, those kind of news events can change and help to reinforce the opportunity in the sector and the upside, whereas today people are a little bit nervous and they're focused on the downside.
Yeah, well, I was looking at Canopy Rivers, who's a client, but when they first did their IPO, I was excited about that IPO. A lot of people were. The price was kind of high, but at this point on a day like today or the days surrounding today, it's at I believe it's at $4. I should check that actually. It was at last time I looked, it was at $4.50 a share. But the one point I would make about those guys is they do more research and due diligence than I could ever do, and they're in some pretty good positions in a bunch of different companies. So,
well, Canopy has provided such leadership, really the true leading influence on the sector in so many ways, and this is their one of their many arms of the company that is focused on specialty investing and strategic relationships and opportunities. So it brings you the expertise of the senior management group at Canopy that have built such an amazing corporation, but you get to play it in some of the smaller and earlier stage investment opportunities that Canopy Rivers was set up to play. So, and they raised a lot of money on their private rounds and their IPO, so they're sitting on a lot of cash, and they would be a significant player in what we just talked about in terms of seeing other opportunities in the specialty space and companies that can be purchased either outright or invested in strategically that could provide future benefits to the parent company or simply be tremendous investment opportunities. So it's interesting to point out that when markets go down, I mean, the tide's going out, all boats are coming down, and there are strong, cashed up, well-managed companies that I think show up as greater opportunities, as you point out, Fraser.
Yeah, I mean, so right now the stock's at about $4, and just 5 sessions ago, it was around the 540-ish area. Mm-hmm. So, and their IPO price, I believe, was at $350. So we're getting really close to that mm-hmm. price, which to me is, makes it feel like a bit of a safer play, and maybe you get a little less volatility in a stock like that. I'm not too sure.
There's certainly, there's big brand recognition with the company itself, and I think they're sitting on a lot of cash, and cash is going to be strategically deployed, as you pointed out. They've got not just the experience and the skill of doing greater due diligence than many, but they're also going to be a go-to phone call for companies that are looking for senior partnerships and guidance and maybe capital all rolled into one. In terms of partnering up or doing a deal with a company like Canopy Rivers.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of volatility, there's some insiders in the market that are a lot less concerned than others when it comes to a day like today. And our friends at 4 East Media have put a clip together for us to take a look at. So we're going to do that right now.
Cannabis stocks are all over the place right now and way too hard to predict. Some may even say volatile. Now, I wouldn't say that, but that's just because I don't know what that word means. Let's turn it over to the good people of Toronto for some answers. Cannabis stocks are experiencing volatility. Do you know anything about that? Why is this?
I have no idea about cannabis stocks.
It's new. People feel uncomfortable about it. And a lot of people who do have money are older from a different generation. So that will put them off.
I would imagine it's because people are unsure of how the market is going to play out in terms of cannabis.
Cannabis stocks are experiencing volatility. Do you know why that is?
I don't know.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea.
What about your friend?
I don't know. He can't say anything right now.
Okay, thanks guys. While the general public might not understand why there's volatility, industry insiders have to understand.
The markets experienced the biggest loss of 2018. About $10 billion of value was lost. Was there any real news to support that loss? The answer is no. There wasn't any company-specific news. However, DBRS, which is a leading global credit risk agency located right here in Toronto, they released a report. They've downgraded the sector and have classified it as a B rating or non-investment grade. There's been a lot of hype in the sector, and reports like this from DBRS certainly don't help in the short term.
Am I worried about volatility? No. I think the biggest thing to consider here, actually, you know what? I would be worried if one thing were to happen. I would be worried if we were seeing a complete lack of demand, if there is nobody lined up and nobody wanted to buy cannabis. But we are seeing stores literally sold out all across the country. I think we're going to start to see some stability in the cannabis market coming up here. We're switching away from the usual methods of valuation like funded capacity over to more traditional methods of valuation like enterprise value to EBITDA. So we're coming up to these new realizations that we need to actually perform, we need to actually produce and sell product. And I think once we start seeing those numbers from the recreational market, we're going to see the whole market stabilize, which I think is coming pretty quick here.
For Midas Letter Live, I'm Adamo Barbieri.
And we're back. But we're only back for a couple seconds because what we're going to do is we're going to get our systems restarted because we're unable to pull up graphs at the moment, and that's pretty important because we're going to talk about gold and other commodities. So we'll probably be back in about 5 minutes, and then we'll be able to break some of this stuff down and get a broader picture of what's going on in the market. So see you in a bit.